Hey guys, it's Charlene. Today I'm going to show you how to make this floating vellum sentiment. So let's get started. For today's card, I'm using the new Sketched Florals stamp set from Altenew. They sent this to me and I thought it was beautiful. I'm actually going to be using it in a couple of upcoming videos as well, so keep an eye out for those. But you can see the beautiful packaging explains everything you need to do in order to get an amazing stamping with these. So I'm working with some new inks as well from Altenew. You can see there I've got the new Fresh Dye ink in Coral Red. This is a beautiful color. And I went ahead and I took out one of the base layers of the floral stamps. So it's a nice solid silhouette style of a stamp. And I'm going to stamp it down here on a piece of A2 size cardstock. So it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Now these are new stamps, so you're going to see throughout this video I do double stamp here and there, especially with these large stamps, just to ensure that I can get some really nice coverage. Now here's a tip for you when you are putting together a 1-layer card where you're using the same stamp all over your background. Use a transparency. You can purchase one of these styles of grid transparencies, and I'll put that down in the description, or you could use a piece of stamp packaging or a piece of acetate. It makes the whole process so much easier because you don't have to worry about cleaning off your stamp in between stampings, and you don't have to worry about getting any little stray bits of ink on your card panel. So you can see I took the 3 stamps on an angle on the diagonal all the way across the front of my card front. This coral red is so bright and beautiful and bold, and it's going to really complement the next color that I'm going to be using here. I did slightly vary how the stamp was pointing on my cardstock, but not by much as I was moving up the card panel. So the next layer is this lovely sketched detail layer. So it looks kind of like it's hand drawn on top of there. And I'm using the jet black ink, which is also a new ink. And I was really surprised by how well this ink stamps. It's stamped beautifully right on the first go. I was really pleased with it. So now I'm bringing in the mid yellow. It goes beautifully with the coral red, and I'm using the second floral from the Sketched Floral stamp set. I'm using the base stamp. So it's this nice big silhouette style of stamp again. And there I've got that transparency back in there. It makes this process so easy. I'm telling you guys, you don't have to worry about getting ink and marks all over your cardstock. So a couple of tips for you guys when you're creating these larger style backgrounds with your stamps. If you're working with large silhouette stamps like I am here, it's a good idea to put an odd number of the stamps on your card and then have some that are going off of the edges. It's similar to like when you're working with sequins. A good number is an odd number because then your eye is not trying to pair up everything on the card. So you can see I've brought in 2 of the large yellow stamps in the corners of the card, one in the bottom right and one in the top left. And now I'm adding that really cool sketch detail layer on top in the jet black. The nice thing about this style of stamp is that they are really easy to layer because you do not have to line them up perfectly. They can just sort of sit right there on the stamp, doesn't have to be perfect, and they still look beautiful. I finished all of the florals. Now I'm coming in and I'm stamping leaves around the edges, and these are going off on the sides. I'm using a couple of different shades of green here. I'm using some Forest Glades, and then later I use some Frayed Leaf and some Evergreen. The red and yellow that I used earlier are part of the Deco Garden collection, whereas these 3 greens and the black are part of the Green Fields collection, and they all go together really well. So again, I'm stamping that detail layer using my transparency in order to move the stamp around. It just makes that process so much easier. And you can see here with the leaves in particular, I'm kind of doing 180-degree turns of my card panel to apply the leaf on each side. So it's going to appear like it's somewhat organized, even though it's kind of meant to look a little bit whimsical. You don't want everything to look too perfect. When you're making this style of card, I found that kind of adjusting the stamps a little bit here and there gives it just a more natural, organic, interesting look when you're looking at the card. The other fun thing about this stamp set is that you can use the base layer of the florals and the leaves separate from the top layer, that sketched layer. I've made a few cards with this stamp set since making this video, and in one of the cards I went ahead and used the very top layer, the sketched layer of the stamps for the florals, and I stamped that in different colors, and it looked really, really pretty. I was so pleased with how it turned out. Now you can see what I'm doing here. I'm coming in with some of the detail layer of the stamps, and I'm stamping them in evergreen, which is a really dark green. And this is just creating filler. Adding filler to your cards like this makes the panel more interesting. It makes it look like there's something going on off of the card because it goes off of the sides like this. And it just helps your eye to focus more on the main images. I'm also coming in with a few of the smaller floral images, but I'm using, again, that top sketched layer, and I'm stamping these in jet black here in the center to finish filling in this card. I did off camera also add a couple more leaves around the edges of the card along with the sketch detail layer of the leaves because I just wanted to fill things in a little bit more. But I want to move on to the awesome floating vellum sentiment. So I'm working with the brand new Versatile Greetings 2 die set, and I purchased before the Versatile Greetings 1 die set, so I was really pleased when Altenew sent me the second die set because they go together and you can use words interchangeably from the two sets. So I decided to use sending from the second set and use hugs from the first set so that I could create my sentiment of sending hugs. So I've cut out 4 of the sending in black cardstock and 4 of the hugs in black cardstock. I know this seems like a lot of layers, but the end result is totally worth it. And the reason I'm doing this style of sentiment, this floating vellum sentiment, is because I have this beautiful background with all of these things going on, and I want the sentiment to stand out, but I also don't want it to take over the whole card. So there's a couple of different ways that you can add a sentiment like this to a busy background. You could put a strip of vellum over the front of your card, and that's going to break up the background enough from the sentiment so that the sentiment stands out. You also could do that with a strip of cardstock, or you could cut down your background panel so that there is just naturally a strip of white somewhere, either at the bottom or on the side of the card. What's really nice about this style of floating vellum sentiment is that it's not going to take away at all from the background, but it's going to create enough of a difference so that your sentiment doesn't get lost. So all I did here was I layered up 3 of the sending, and I used liquid glue to do that, and then I glued it to the vellum shadow layer. So now I'm going to go ahead and flip it over, and I'm going to glue that last die cut of sending. I'm going to glue it to the back of the vellum so that it sits directly underneath the top layer of the sending die cut. And that's going to, 1, make it so that you don't see any glue lines, but 2, it's also going to elevate the vellum up off the card when I glue it to the front of the card. And you could create as much of a float as you would like. So you could do more than one layer on the back. You could do 2 or 3 layers of that sending behind the vellum, and that's just going to continue to lift that vellum up off of the cardstock. Now you could just add a colored piece or a white piece of cardstock as your shadow layer instead of the vellum shadow layer, and then you wouldn't need to do this floating technique, although I still would recommend putting a couple layers of the shadow to bring it up off of the back of the card. But something about this vellum technique, this just really makes a nice, beautiful, soft, subtle transition between your background and your sentiment. Nothing gets lost. I love the way it looks. I wish I could take credit for this style of sentiment, but I actually heard this mentioned by Kathy Zilski, who I absolutely just adore. She is so funny, and I think she's very, very creative. And she mentioned that one of her subscribers on her YouTube channel suggested doing this, and I think it's brilliant. So I knew I had to use it as soon as I heard about it. And the subscriber was right. It's a great way to float your vellum. You don't have any glue lines. It looks so nice. So off camera, I did go ahead and do that for the hugs as well. And now you can see I just add my glue to the back sentiment that's behind the vellum. And you're not going to see any glue anywhere on the vellum because there's not any showing around on those edges. And now I can glue my sentiment directly to my card. And I did go ahead and matte that pretty background layer with some black cardstock as well. So the black matting layer ties in with my black sentiment. Now you could just leave this style of card as is, but of course I always like to bring in some bling. I didn't want to use sequins on this card. I wanted to use some jewels because I thought that they were a little more subtle. They'd add a bit of bling without kind of being overwhelming on the front of the card. So there's the finished card, guys. I hope you picked up some tips and tricks today. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as hit that notification bell, so that way I can continue bringing you more crafty content in the future. Until next time, happy crafting.